I don't really want to say I told you so, but I told you so. I told you elite level super shoes were here to stay. They're not going anywhere. We've got a lot to discuss. Let's get into it. And why was I so sure of myself that there was going to be the continuation of elite level super shoes? Well, when this shoe, the Adios Pro 4, was first announced and kind of released back in September at the Berlin Marathon, I was curious really about two things. How quickly Adidas pros and elites were going to adopt this shoe, meaning they're going to put away the Evo 1 and start racing in this shoe, and then how long that lasted, because while this is a great shoe and it will be a big upgrade for most runners, non-elite runners, if you give an elite runner a shoe tailored for them, which was the Evo 1, and then you take that shoe away from them and you give them this shoe, which is really a shoe tailored for consumers because it blends a few different things. It's not just performance oriented. The elites are not going to really like that. So Adidas created a very interesting problem for themselves, and I was curious how that was going to play out. And over the fall 2024 marathon season, we saw most Adidas elites and pros in the Adios Pro 4. There were Evo ones around, but most of them in Berlin, Chicago, and New York were racing in Adios Pro 4s, and Pro 4s got onto the podium here and there. Overall, it looked like the switch was going pretty well. However, I just knew that, like I said, Adidas had already given the elites the best shoe possible, a shoe tailored for them in the Evo 1. Those elites are not going to want to step back to a non-elite level shoe, a shoe not tailored for them. And there's a very specific reason right now going on in the marathon as to why. And that big reason is the sub 2-hour marathon that really every elite is kind of gunning for right now. And I'm convinced we're going to see attempts at it in the 2025 marathon season. And Nike and Adidas, which are realistically the two brands that are going to break that goal with their elites, they're the ones best positioned for that. Though Asics could maybe sneak in there, and maybe one or two other brands could sneak in there, but it's pretty doubtful. I think this is going to be a Nike versus Adidas thing. They also want that first true open course sub 2-hour marathon world record. So right now, elites are looking for any advantage they can possibly get, whether that's training or equipment. And again, the Evo 1 for Adidas athletes was a shoe for them. They want the next generation of that shoe, and they got that shoe finally. And here it is, the Adidas Adizero Adios Pro Evo 2, a shoe I said was coming. My I told you so moment. Now this appeared on the World Athletics Shoe Checker, I think about a week ago. I first noticed via Instagram maybe a couple days ago, but here we are now. And I think this photo is very deceptive because it's not studio photography. This literally is just a snapshot from who knows where. So the angle's very strange, makes this shoe look a lot stranger than it actually is. I think in reality, this shoe is probably almost identical in geometry to the Evo 1. This isn't a 50 mil stack height shoe. This is fully legal for World Athletics. This is a shoe that elites, Adidas elites, will be racing in, the majority of them, I would think, next year in 2025. So it's a very legal shoe. But where does the Evo 2 sit within the larger 2025 Adizero range? Well, the Adios Pro 4, this is their marquee super shoe. This is the super shoe that they're going to promote. This is the one that majority of runners, especially non-elites and probably some pros and elites will be racing in. This is the shoe that Adidas wants you to buy. This is the shoe that's their latest everything tech, and they're very proud of this shoe. And so far the reviews of it have been fairly good, though it seems like there might be a couple issues. And by the way, I will have a review of this shoe at some point on the channel. I just need to spend some time in it. But I've got some thoughts, as I always do. But this will be the shoe that you see Adidas promoting a lot next year. But where does this shoe sit within the realm of Adizero super shoes that we've seen over the past couple of years? I think there's a couple ways of looking at this. I think the easiest way is to start with the Adios Pro 3. That was the super shoe for the Adizero range for over 2 years. So you put that on one side, then you can put the Evo 1 on the other side, and the Adios Pro sits really cleanly in the middle of those. It's got some of the performance from the Evo 1, and it's got some of the durability from the Adios Pro 3. It's not as durable as the Pro 3, and it's not as performance-oriented as the Evo 1. It's blending the two. The Evo 1 was performance above everything else, and Adidas was very clear about that. But the Adios Pro 4 is not. It needs to blend the two to make a much more consumer-friendly shoe. So this is where that consumer-level super shoe versus the elite-level super shoe will be something we're dealing with Adidas, Nike, and now Asics into 2025 and beyond. Another way to look at this, and I think this will really define the consumer and the elite tiers to the Adizero range, is again to start with the Adios Pro 3. And out of the Adios Pro 3 grew the Evo 1. And that was actually from the first failed Adios Pro 4 program that they were doing. Yes, there was one before the consumer version of the Pro 4 that we saw released at the end of 2024. I have a whole video on that, link in the description if you're interested in that. But the Evo 1 was taking what they could out of that program and really going in an evolutionary direction. Thus, Evo 1, performance first. Now, the Adios Pro 4 fits in here as the next generation of the Adios Pro, and it's got a little of the performance and a little of the learnings, geometry and whatnot from the Evo 1, but it needs to blend durability and performance together at that consumer tier more than the Evo 1 ever did. So the Adios Pro 4 is really sort of a compromise between the Adios Pro 3 durability and the performance of the Evo 1. It's blending the two, and that's really what's needed here. So this is where the Evo 2 comes in. And again, this photo is just a snapshot. It's not actual studio photography. I think the geometry of this shoe, the way this shoe looks, is very similar to the Evo 1, but it's probably an evolution of the foam. It's probably got the new light traction outsole, the CPU outsole. It's probably got some other material refinements to make it lighter, make it more responsive. Again, it's really pushing the performance bar for an elite runner. And that's what elites want. Elites care only about performance. They don't care about anything else. As long as the shoe gets them over the line of the race, that's it. They don't care about anything else about the shoe. But obviously for a consumer, we want to blend performance with durability with cost. We want those things balanced much more finely than an elite would ever want. So this is where these two tiers will exist for the Adizero range. The consumer tier is going to be sort of a blend of the two, where the Evo range is going to be that elite first shoe that's really going to be pushing performance forward for Adizero. Now, Adidas isn't alone here. Nike, I think, is also going to go this direction. And I made a video about what I think is actually happening, and I would check this out if you want that whole story. But for all of 2024, we've heard about the Dev 15 or Dev 16E models. There's been a few names for this, but this was essentially the Alphafly 3 with some changes to it. And we didn't really know what those changes are, but we know that they're a little bit more focused on the outsole, probably something around the plate, and probably some difference in the foam. Again, it's tuning the shoe more towards the elites. And we've seen a few elites, including Eliud Kipchoge and Jakob Ingebrigtsen, in that new Dev 15 or Dev 16E version of the Alphafly 3. And that's why I'm convinced there's an elite tier coming for Nike as well. And I think this tiering for Nike Racing's product lines is going to follow a lot of what they're doing with their training product lines. But what I think we're going to see is a base model, in this case an Alphafly 3, which is going to be consumer friendly, meaning it's durable and performance oriented. It's blending the two in a reasonable cost. And it's really tuned for all athletes. Every athlete can benefit from it. And then they're going to introduce an elite tier, which is going to be elite focused, performance first, performance above everything else, tuned specifically for elites. Now, over time, these two tiers also allow for this coming of next-gen technology, which I've been talking about on the channel that I think is coming in the next 2 to 3 years, to first show up in this elite tier, because that's going to be the one that's going to have the most performance. So that base tier is going to be the current technology, current foams, current geometries, and the elite tier will be the next-gen stuff slowly trickling in, and eventually we'll see it into the base. But for Nike, this gives Nike a place to really focus on making the best super shoe for the most runners, which I think they did a wonderful job in the Vaporfly 3 and the Alphafly 3. I think that's a shoe that works for many people, but it's not necessarily only tailored for elites, which is where elites want something tailored for them. Again, going after that 2-hour marathon barrier. So you're going to get that second tier that's going to be really tuned to that and really allow Nike to show the innovation for athletes that they're really known for. Another reason I'm convinced that we're going to see these tiers from Nike is this. We've already seen them from Nike in the Nike Dragonfly 2 and Dragonfly 2 Elite. Now, these are fundamentally the same shoe. However, the Dragonfly 2 Elite has some tweaks to it, mainly a carbon fiber plate, a different spike plate, and non-removable pins or spikes that are a little lighter, overall saving some weight in the shoe and making it a little bit more snappy than the base Dragonfly 2 for a elite level track athlete who is going for an Olympic or a world record. But it fundamentally is the same shoe, just with some minor tweaks to it that make it better for that top-end athlete. But the strategy for Nike is a little bit different than what Adidas is doing. As I said, there's really very little difference between the Dragonfly 2 and the Dragonfly 2 Elite. There's a couple tweaks that make the Dragonfly 2 Elite better for that top-end runner, and there's only a $30 difference between these two shoes. But they are essentially the same shoe, just the Elite version has some tweaks that make it better, faster, lighter, more performance-oriented. And I think that's actually quite a smart move. Now, again, there's no confirmation from Nike on this, but this shoe is currently in market, and Nike does have a history of these elite level race shoes or super shoes in their past. So this is something I'm going to be following very closely for Nike in 2025. And Asics is even joining this in 2025. And I think beyond Nike and Adidas being the two that are going to go back to back with, really trying to innovate into that sub 2 hour marathon on an open course, Asics is the other brand that could really kind of sneak in there and maybe get there first. And I think this is a shoe that they're trying to go after that with starting in 2025. And right now it's called the MZ Type 1, or as we've heard described in a few places, the Meta Light. Now, this is a race legal shoe, even though this image looks like it's a huge stack. This is a shoe that was tested by Clayton Young in his New York City build series videos on YouTube. I'll put a link in the description to those if you've not seen them. I highly recommend them. He was considering racing in it, but ultimately he didn't. And it was on some other Asics elite athletes at New York City. So this is a race legal shoe, and what it's been described as Asics' version of the Evo 1. It has FF Turbo Plus in it, but it also has a new foam, and I'm going to assume that new foam is something like FF Turbo Max, following Asics' naming conventions for their foams. So this should be a really interesting shoe, and it's going to position Asics right up there at the top tier along with Nike and Adidas for 2025, which I think is quite exciting. Do I think this elite tier is a bad thing? No, I actually think it's a very good thing. Now, I've seen criticism in my comments on this channel and other places where people have been discussing this, saying that now it puts a shoe like this, the Nike Alpha 3, not at the tip of the spear, not at the top of the line for performance that you as a runner can buy. And that's true, but I'm also going to say that 95, maybe 99% of us non-elite runners buying a shoe like this, the Alpha 3, are never going to remotely get near the performance that's in this shoe. But an elite runner, especially the top elites in the world, they are going to get to the performance in this shoe, and they need a little bit more, which is where that elite tier is really going to cater to them. But I think, again, that sets it up to the brands being able to push these shoes further than they could with a shoe that they need to make for consumers, make durable and costly for consumers. They can push it in a new direction. And again, that elite tier shoe will be available for purchase. You'll be paying a premium for it. But like I said, 95, maybe 99% of us don't need all of the performance in this shoe. We definitely don't need that elite tier. So I don't see it as a bad thing at all. In fact, again, it just gives the brands more space to continue to push innovation and a place for them to bring in some of those next-gen materials, which are going to be costly and they're going to be rare. So these elite shoes are also going to be costly and rare, though I think the pricing of these aren't necessarily going to be where the Evo 1 was. I think there's going to be a range with what these shoes actually cost in the marketplace. But again, they're available to buy. Now, I've said many times on this channel, I come from cycling, and if as a cyclist, I want to get the top-end elite level, top of the top, best gear I possibly can, take the Evo 1 price in whatever country you're in, probably add at least 2 zeros, maybe 3 zeros to the end of that. And that's what you're going to pay in cycling for that top of the top of the top. So I know running shoes are expensive, and what I think is expensive is probably not what you think is expensive. But again, I think it's reasonable for someone who needs it. And I like the fact that these elite tiered shoes will be available. Because again, as a non-elite runner, I'm going to get all the performance that I need out of a shoe like this, the Adios Pro 4 or the Alpha Fly 3. I'm never going to get to the boundaries of what these shoes can do performance-wise. But if I was going after an important PR, I was a runner trying to get a pro contract, you know, I want to min-max every single thing. The fact that I can go buy that elite level shoe, I think that's a really good thing. I think it's good that it's available in the marketplace. But I can already see a lot of the comments saying, what about the Vaporfly Next% 1 or 2? That shoe was aggressive, responsive, elites and non-elites. All of us raced in that shoe and everything was great. Well, I think that one-size-fits-all approach to super shoes doesn't really work anymore because there's been a lot of advancements in foams and materials, and it doesn't work. Case in point, the Vaporfly 3. This is by far my favorite Vaporfly. I will pick this over the Vaporfly 1 or 2 any single day. This shoe just really works for me, but we did see a lot of Nike elites prefer not to race in the shoe. They've been using older Vaporflies because I think Nike tuned this shoe for more runners, and I talked a lot about this in my review content in 2023 about this shoe, but by doing that, they did take the edge off this shoe. This had a little less of a race flat feel, a little less of that aggressiveness that the Next% 1 or 2 did. But I will still say this is the better Vaporfly for more runners. So this is a really good case study for why that one size just doesn't fit all for super shoes now, and having an elite tier to the super shoe is really going to help. And I think for the Vaporfly 4, which we will see in 2025, that's going to allow them to continue the Vaporfly 3 and make it a better Vaporfly for more runners, while having a tuned Vaporfly 4, Vaporfly 4 Elite for their elite runners that prefer that more race flat type shoe for the marathon distance. I think everyone wins in this instance. This is going to be an evolving story all of 2025, probably into 2026, that I'm going to follow very, very closely. As always, let me know in the comments your thoughts on this. I know there's going to be a lot of opinions, but as you know, I love the back and forth and the conversation on this channel, so let me know in the comments below. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you find this content useful, consider subscribing. You'll see more content from me pop up in your feed. If not, drop a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.